Hello, welcome to Soulprint Intuitive Tarot. Today I'm going to look at voting rights. So last week there was an appeals court in the Eighth Circuit, which applies to Arkansas, Iowa, Minnesota, Missouri, Nebraska, North Dakota, and South Dakota. Okay, that appeals court held that groups could not basically sue um, i- states if there was, a problem. This started apparently from a lawsuit that was started because of basically a gerrymandered district, and they were saying that it was the NAACP said that the new map created. Uh, it diluted the voting power of Black voters in the state of Arkansas. So that sent shockwaves radiating, because basically what it said was that the only group that could actually sue was the Department of Justice. So they were the only ones who would be allowed to file these kinds of suits. Now, these kinds of suits have been it's been going on for years. Um, and it's always been, or primarily always been these other groups that have filed these suits. And now all of a sudden this appeal court is saying, no, they're not allowed to. That's what's called big brouhaha. This could really, really damage and impact voting rights in the United States, which is already getting, dismantled. So now this ruling by the appeals court is invariably going to end up um, with the Supreme Court. Now, of course, the Supreme Court right now has a bunch of very Republican, Trump appointed, or McConnell appointed, or Federation Society appointed judges who, are really quite intent on dismantling. You don't need to look any further than Roe v. Wade, right? So I want to take a look not at that specifically, but I want to take a look at what's going on with the Supreme Court, and not even that. What I want to know is, how does the Supreme Court get fixed? Okay, like that's really what I want to know. Because we understand that Biden is reluctant to expand the court. Okay, so I mean, he certainly has it within his purview to say, wait a minute, we've got a nine judge panel right now. Yeah, now we're going to make it a 13 judge panel, and just appoint judges. Okay, so some really nice Democratic leaning, left leaning, center leaning judges, and try to balance out that imbalance. But for whatever reason, he doesn't appear to be wanting to do that. And I mean, part of it, I think, boils down to, okay, well then what? And then the next president, expands the court to 15, and then the next one to 17. And before you know it, you have, a 42-member Supreme Court. So I can understand that. Now, there are also many of us who have said that we see a couple of the senior really right-leaning judges leaving the court or retiring, and frankly the two that seem to be causing the most trouble, which is Alito and Clarence Thomas. But that doesn't seem to be happening anytime fast. I mean, we've been waiting and waiting, and that's not changing. So, what I want to look at is how what process is going to happen, what is going to go on that is going to help that Supreme Court become balanced again. Um, the thing to remember when stuff like this goes on, because it's scary, right? But the thing to remember is that it can be undone. All right. So, when Roe versus Wade was struck down, everybody like freaked out and panicked, and rightly so. But what you have seen is the states. So what they did was they bounced the problem to the states. Right? The Supreme Court said, "Nah, it's not federal. This is let every state decide for themselves." Well, and then what happened? So what you have is a whole bunch of red states voting to enshrine abortion rights because 75 or 80% of the American people say this is not what you're doing, and we don't want the strict abortion bans. It's insane. So things get corrected, and there will come a time where the federal government will step in, and there will be a new look law pertaining to you know, uh, female health and abortion, et cetera, et cetera. That's going to come down. But I want to look right now and see how we correct this situation because it, you know, block by block, they are creating some real like destruction. So let's take a peek, shall we, and see if we can figure out how the Supreme Court, the US Supreme Court, becomes balanced again. What can we anticipate going on that would allow us to see that court is not so lopsided? Okay, here we go. So U.S. Supreme Court balance going forward. U.S. Supreme Court balance going forward. U.S. Supreme Court balance going forward. So you did notice, I'm sure, that I don't know last week or the week before, Chief Justice Roberts came out with this new thing that was like, so these are the new ethic rules that we are going to follow, except they're not new because we've always been following them. And no, we haven't created a mechanism by which they can be monitored or corrected. But yeah, we've slapped some stuff down on a piece of paper. Now, that received mixed reviews. On the one hand, it was like, well, can't really do anything. On the other hand, it was, well, at least the guy's willing to acknowledge and talk about the fact that there's a huge problem because the US Supreme Court has, I don't know, something like a 25 or 30% approval rating with the American people. So finally, the Supreme Court has woken up and gone, oh, wait a minute, we've pushed too hard, and now a lot of people don't trust anything we say. So let's look at the cards. Not surprising, we're starting with the Ace of Pentacles. All right. So a big part of the problem is that there's money. Okay. There's too much money floating around groups, floating around justices, certain justices. And, that has become something that has a great deal of, this is the thing, right? Wealthy people do not want their wealth disturbed. All right. They want to pay a minimum amount of taxes, and they don't like governments who try to raise their taxes or take away privileges and perks of being uber wealthy. Well, and then you end up with people on the Supreme Court who frankly become very wealthy. I'm not saying they don't do it legally. Some might, I don't know, allegedly, but they end up with a great deal of wealth. And so then they join the ranks of those who don't want their money touched. And it has created this sort of kind of vicious cycle where all of the rich people are banding together saying we're going to do everything and anything we can to ensure that the government doesn't take one, red nickel out of us. And the rest of the country going, like, wait a minute, you guys, we are carrying the tax load. So money ends up being, not surprisingly, kind of the root of what's going on with the Supreme Court. Now, for a long time, it was quiet. It was hidden. People didn't quite know. They might have suspected, yeah, there was talk here and there, but by and large, it was not spoken about. It was not out there in sort of the public domain. Well, guess what? Now we have not only Sheldon Whitehouse, bless him, but we have a whole lot of investigative reporters who are running around and digging up stuff and saying, you know what, you're doing this and you're doing this and you're not reporting this and you're not reporting that, and you're taking stuff from this person, and then that person has a case in front of the court that you're not excusing yourself from. And so what happens is this thing has started to become exposed, and exposed in a way that is not, it's gaining legs, all right? It's not receding in the public sort of mind head. It is becoming more and more apparent, more information is coming out. So what happens is you have a situation where sort of like all of a sudden you have an emperor has no clothes, right? All of a sudden, all of these justices who are supposed to be above reproach and above questioning, which I don't know, but it seems to me that if no person's against the law, they're not supposed to be above the law, but sorry, above the law, no person's above the law. But for whatever reason, apparently somehow they are right now. But so, oh, wait a minute, now there's a problem. All of a sudden, everything that was going on quietly before that we got away with for decades, that's a problem. Okay, well, oops, wait a minute. Oh no, now we have a problem, right? Now we have people causing us stress and strain and anxiety because, oh my goodness, they are seeing what was hidden. And now we're worried and now we're stressed. And some of them are pushing back and kind of stupidly, in my opinion, going out into the public domain and basically saying things like, you have no right to question us. Who the hell do you think you are? Which is kind of like the wrong tact to take, in my opinion. Um, and then you have other justices on the court saying, the stink that is being caused by some justices and their shenanigans is going to be very hard to wipe away from the Supreme Court. We're going to have to be carrying this stink with us for a long time until this thing gets corrected. Alrighty. So now you have the Justice card and you have the King of Wands. All right. So what you have now is a lot of talk, a lot of communication going on about how to rebalance this, how to make this somehow, how to correct this, how to make it so that um, what is coming from the court is not received with anger and resentment and horror, because lately it seems everything that comes out of that Supreme Court, people are up in arms about. And so the court is now trying to figure out how to create this new messaging. All right, that's what's going on with the Supreme Court. Question is, that's lovely. But I want somebody to tell me what is going on behind the scenes that is going to allow a course correction. Okay, we know what's going on in the Supreme Court. We see it. We see it with their rulings. And you have, now listen, and this is the thing I want you all to remember while you're busy panicking. Don't forget that Joe Biden has elevated to the courts or created judgeships. I'm not sure what the terminology is there. More judges in his 3 years than like any other previous president, and outstripped Trump by leaps and bounds. Okay. So Biden has been very, very busy on other court levels, getting, center, left leaning, intelligent judges in there to balance off some of the real right wing judges. But what's happening is that we don't hear about that, right? We hear about the crazy things that, in many cases, it really, judges who are not even qualified to be on the court are on the courts making decisions. That's what we hear about. But there's a lot of stuff going on quietly behind the scenes that we don't hear about. And so this becomes another one of those situations where everybody kind of needs to take a deep breath. All right, I have shuffled the remaining cards, okay? And I want to ask these cards, show me the correction, show me the correction, show me the correction. That's what I want to know. That's, I think, probably what you want to know. Levers. Eight of Swords. Okay. So there is maneuvering, there's stuff going on behind the scenes. There is conversations that are going on. There are um, think groups, I think they're called, like, people have really started to really work towards figuring out how to create a course correction with that Supreme Court in a way that um, stops sort of the wholesale destruction, if you will, that's going on now. Okay. So you have groupings of people coming together. There's partnerships going on that are working on this issue. It is not being ignored and it is not being brushed under the rug. But if there's one thing that, we should have all figured out by now when it comes to Biden's administration is they get stuff done, they don't talk about it. In fact, sometimes we wish they would talk about it more so people would actually know what they're doing. But the reality is they just systematically go along and get stuff done. So they are working very, very hard at coming up with a plan that brings the wish card and balance into place. Okay. So again, there are two justices at a minimum that are going to be leaving the court. This is going to create, and I'm being told, is it in 2024 or not? Yes. Both justices, are there two? Two justices are going to leave the court in 2024, and very close together. Um, and there's going to be a little bit of pushback. McConnell's going to try to prevent, judges getting put on that. It's not going to happen. It's not going to work this time. He's going to be overridden. Um, and so there's going to be two new judges that are going to ascend to the Supreme Court. That is going to help rebalance things. You've got the magician here, right? That is going to create a balancing of the courts. Now, unless I am mistaken in my math, that I think that would still it would balance the courts. I'm not sure though if it would be enough to take it. It wouldn't make it lean quite so hard, right? But you have, um, yeah, it would balance it numerically. It would bring this thing into center. There's going to be, listen, this is the thing. Okay, thank you. This is the thing. this situation is not going to just disappear. It's not going to go away on its own. You're going to keep hearing about stuff. There's going to continue to be stuff in the news. But as 2024 unfolds, there's going to be a lot of energy shifts and changes in 2024. This is the thing, though. You have to remember that the energy is such that it gets worse and before it gets better. So one of the things that has happened, right, is that all the horrors, if you will, of the Supreme Court have kind of come up into people's consciousness. And now that is when things actually start getting corrected. So there's going to be some significant changes going on within the court. Now, what's going to happen is it feels like it more in 2025, 26 are what is what I'm getting. That's when you're going to start seeing these court cases that are working their way up through the court system hit the Supreme Court to correct things that have already been dismantled. Okay, so that's where you're going to see the strengthening of the laws and the rules. And this time, there is an awareness or an understanding that things need to be, I can't remember the word, like entrenched in law, right? They can't just be that kind of, well, it's always been that way. And so there's no reason to think it's not going to continue that way. Well, guess what? You figured out that there's a really good reason to understand it can get changed. So it feels like there's going to be a course correction of 2 judges. Now, is at some point, are we going to see that court expand, Spirit? It's possible that somewhere around the end of 24, 25, you're going to see another judge leave the Supreme Court. And I believe it's going to be a conservative justice. Now, it's interesting because I know a lot of people have talked about Amy Coney Barrett, and I personally am not seeing that. That doesn't mean it's not going to happen. It just means that's not what I'm seeing. What I am seeing, interestingly, is Chief Justice Roberts and something going on there. And I don't want to actually travel down that road. So I'm not quite sure what it looks like. But what I'm seeing is you've got 2 in 2024, and then it looks like a third one in 2025. And the thing to remember is the new laws that go in through the court system, right? It takes a while for them to hit the Supreme Court. And so by the time it hits the Supreme Court, a lot of the corrections are going to be being presented to a center left court. All right. Um, yeah. Um, yeah. See, look, you've got three justices falling. All right. 2 more coming in right away. Important that everybody doesn't start jumping around and dancing in the street thinking this is going to correct everything. It's not, but it's going to go a long ways towards creating a more holistic and balanced approach. This is the thing, right? Even those of us who, the extreme right makes our hair like, fall out of our head. We don't want a real left court. We want a center court, or we should, right? We should want a court where everybody's um, ideas, thought processes, attitudes, etc., come into play. One of the big things that they're telling me that is going to start creating a real significant shift is going to be a push to get religion out of the court system, to push it back kind of where it belongs, because in the United States, the religion and the law are supposed to, the government and religion are supposed to be like completely separate entities. You have what's going on the right, this real push towards you know uh, um ensuring that Christian religions are what rules the court. There's going to be a movement. There's going to be, and it could just be with the people that are on the court, people who are leaving the court, but there's definitely going to be this shift where the courts are the courts and they're not an adjunct to the church. That's going to go a long way because um, a lot of what's going on right now are moral decisions, right? Moral decisions about, who should love who, moral decisions about what a woman can and cannot do with her body, moral decisions about when a fetus is a human. Um, those are religious based or moral based decisions that has nothing to do with the law, and it feels very much like in the next 2 3 years 4 years you're going to see a real separation of those two elements, so that um there's simply just more that part of it, that kind of moral pontificating that goes on, um, that's going to be dampened down. And when that happens, that's where you're going to see some real significant changes moving. It's literally going to strike down the older ideas and attitudes and replace it with a brighter, more holistic, more whole, and frankly, more reflective um, court system. A court system that actually reflects the people of the United States and reflects their thoughts and feelings and opinions, and as reflective of the kind of country that they want to actually be living in, as opposed to the one that seems to be being dictated to them by people who are very much embraced in a certain type of religious belief. So, Spirit, can you just tell me when this latest slash to voting right, when that gets up to the US, first of all, is the US Supreme Court going to hear the case? Yes. And is the Supreme Court going to agree with the Eighth Circuit Appeals Court ruling? And I'm hearing no. That's what I know right now. Thank you very, very much for being here. Please don't forget to put your questions in the comment section below so the amazing Joyce can collect them all. And don't forget, this Friday is going to be a big, hope, depending on your questions, a big Pendulum Friday, because we, of course, did not do it last week. All right. Thank you very much for being here. Until next time, take care and be well. Bye-bye.